Why does the government take our money, and why are we legally obligated to pay even when we're pretty sure a good chunk of it is being wasted? Let's be honest, the tax code isn't just a dry set of economic formulas, it is actually the oldest, most complicated social contract between a human being and power. The deal is supposed to be simple. You pay, and in exchange you get roads, paved highways, police protection, and a civilized society. If you don't pay, the deal breaks, and theoretically, you're left with chaos, fending for yourself in a Mad Max world. But today, that deal feels more confusing than ever. In this video, we are going to tear apart the black box of taxation. We'll figure out how we went from paying taxes in grain and livestock to the modern labyrinth of the IRS. We will look at why economists, from Adam Smith to the guys on Wall Street, still can't agree on what's fair, and most importantly, we are going to break down the American tax system specifically. I'm betting many of you don't actually know the difference between FICA and federal income tax, or why your grocery bill has a tax in one state but not another. We're going to fix that. Because at the end of the day, taxes shouldn't be a mystery. They are the bill for the services we supposedly ordered, and you have every right to know exactly what you are paying for. But to understand the beast that is the US tax code, we have to go back way before the invention of the dollar bill. Taxes appeared long before paper money or even writing. We're talking about ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia 4,000 years BC. Back then, you didn't file a 1040 form. You paid in nature: grain, cattle, beer, honey. In Egypt, special scribes would walk the fields, measure your harvest, and take the pharaoh's cut right there on the spot. If you didn't pay, you were beaten. It was that simple. The Roman Empire turned taxation into a science. They had a tributum, a war tax on citizens, and even a portorium, which was a customs duty on trade. But the Romans got creative. They taxed slaves, inheritances, and famously, they even taxed public toilets. When the Emperor Vespasian was criticized by his son for taxing urine collected from public latrines, he held up a coin and asked if it smelled. His son said no, and Vespasian delivered the famous line, "Money doesn't smell." As history moved on, governments got even more inventive and ridiculous. In 1696, England introduced the window tax. The logic was that a richer person would have a bigger house with more windows. The result? People started bricking up their windows to save money. You can still see old buildings in London today with bricked up spaces where windows used to be. Peter the Great in Russia famously taxed beards because he wanted his people to look more European. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to carry a special coin that literally said, "The tax has been paid." But here in America, our relationship with taxes has always been, let's call it, explosive. Remember, the United States was basically founded on a tax dispute. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just about tea, it was a protest against taxation without representation. For a long time, the US government survived mostly on tariffs, taxes on imported goods. There was no income tax. Can you imagine that? Keeping 100% of your paycheck? But that changed in 1913 with the 16th Amendment. That was the birth of the modern federal income tax. World War I and World War II blew up the government's budget, and suddenly taxes weren't just for the rich, they became a mass obligation for everyone. Today you pay taxes constantly, often without realizing it. When you buy a coffee, you pay sales tax. When you fill up your car, you're paying federal and state gas taxes. When you get your paycheck, Uncle Sam has already taken his slice. But how exactly is that slice carved up in the US? The American tax system is like a layer cake, and it's important to know which layer you're biting into. It's split into 3 distinct levels: federal, state, and local. First, the big one, federal taxes. This is the money that goes straight to Washington, D.C., to the U.S. Treasury. This pays for the big ticket items, the military, national debt interest, and federal agencies. But look closely at your pay stub. You'll see federal withholding, but you also see FICA or Social Security and Medicare. These are payroll taxes. They are technically separate from your income tax. They are mandatory insurance premiums for your old age and health care. Then there is the state level. This is where the US gets really unique. In Europe, taxes are pretty uniform across the country. In America, it's the Wild West. If you live in California or New York, you are paying a hefty state income tax on top of your federal taxes. But if you live in Texas, Florida, or Nevada, you pay 0 state income tax. Sounds great, right? But remember, there is no free lunch. States with 0 income tax often make up for it with higher sales taxes or higher property taxes. That brings us to the third layer, local taxes. This is mostly your property tax. If you own a home, you know this pain. You pay a percentage of your home's value to your county or city every year. This is the money that actually impacts your daily life the most. It funds the local public schools, the fire department, the local police, and fills the potholes on your street. Finally, we have consumption taxes or sales tax. In most of the world, they have VAT, value-added tax, which is hidden in the price. If a sandwich costs €5, in Paris you pay €5. In the US we do it differently. The price on the sticker is $5, but when you get to the register they ask for $5.45. That extra bit is the sales tax, and it varies not just by state but sometimes by city. So we have income taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes. It's a complex web, but the biggest debate isn't just about how we pay, but how much is fair. And that is a question that has sparked an economic war that has been raging for centuries. And that question of how much is fair is where things stop being about math and start being about ideology, power, and human nature. For most of modern history, economists have been split into 2 giant camps, and their fight quietly determines how much of your paycheck you'll actually get to keep. On one side, you have the idea that the government should be small, limited, and cautious. Think of the state as a night watchman. Its job is to protect borders, enforce laws, and make sure contracts are honored, not to micromanage the economy. According to this view, high taxes are dangerous. They punish productivity, kill incentives, and slow innovation. If you take too much from people, they simply stop working harder, stop investing, or move their money somewhere else. On the other side, you have a very different philosophy. Here, the government isn't just a guard, it's an active player. When the economy slows down, the state should step in, spend money, create jobs, and stabilize demand. When inequality grows too large, taxes should be used to redistribute wealth and keep society from tearing itself apart. According to this view, taxes aren't a necessary evil, they're a tool. Used correctly, they make everyone richer in the long run. This ideological battle reached its most famous visual form thanks to a single napkin. In the 1970s, economist Arthur Laffer sketched a simple curve to explain a powerful idea. Imagine tax revenue on one axis and tax rates on the other. At 0% tax, the government collects nothing, that's obvious. But at 100% tax, where the government takes every dollar you earn, revenue also collapses to 0. Why? Because no rational person would work if every extra dollar went straight to the state. Somewhere between those two extremes lies a sweet spot, a tax rate that maximizes revenue without destroying incentives. Raise taxes too high and people work less, hide income or leave, cut them too low and the government simply can't function. This idea became a cornerstone of modern conservative economic policy in the United States and a powerful argument for tax cuts. Here's the twist. Everyone agrees the curve exists. Nobody agrees where the peak actually is. And historically, the US has experimented wildly. In the 1950s, the top marginal income tax rate in America was over 90%. Let that sink in. For the highest earners, almost everything above a certain level went to the government, and yet this period is remembered as a golden age of American growth, infrastructure, and the middle class. So what changed? Globalization, capital mobility, technology. Today, money moves at the speed of light. If taxes become too aggressive, wealth doesn't just complain, it relocates. This is why the same debate keeps repeating every election cycle. Raise taxes on the rich, cut taxes to stimulate growth. The arguments never die because the economy itself keeps evolving. But to really understand why Americans feel so emotionally different about taxes compared to the rest of the world, we need to zoom out and look at how the US compares globally. In Northern Europe, places like Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, taxes are high, very high. Income taxes, consumption taxes, payroll taxes, they add up fast. But here's the key difference. Citizens can clearly see what they're getting in return. Healthcare is universal, college is free or heavily subsidized, childcare is affordable, losing your job doesn't mean losing your dignity or your medical coverage. Taxes feel less like money disappearing into a black hole and more like a membership fee for a functioning society. Now compare that to the American model. In the US, taxes are lower on average, but many essential services are privatized. Healthcare is tied to employment. College can put you in debt for decades. Retirement security depends heavily on personal savings and investments. In exchange for lower taxes, Americans are given something else: responsibility and risk. This creates a very different psychological relationship with the state. In Europe, the government feels like a service provider. In America, it often feels like a collector. And then there are the outliers, the so-called tax havens. Places like the UAE, where there is no income tax at all, sounds like paradise. But again, there's no free lunch. These systems rely on oil wealth, migrant labor, or very specific economic structures that simply don't scale to large democratic nations. The American system sits somewhere in the middle. Lower taxes than Europe, more services than tax havens, more freedom, but also more anxiety. And this is where things get really interesting, because the pain of taxes isn't just economic, it's psychological. Humans are irrational with money. Take sales tax. In the US, it's added at the register. You see it, you feel it, and yet it somehow hurts less than income tax. Why? Because it's fragmented, a few cents here, $1 there. It doesn't feel like a single loss. Income tax, on the other hand, is brutal. You earn money, and before you ever touch it, it's gone. The loss happens invisibly. Your paycheck arrives already wounded, and psychologically, we hate losses more than we enjoy gains. Then there's the famous tax refund. Every year, millions of Americans celebrate getting a refund from the government. It feels like winning, like a bonus. But in reality, it's just your own money being returned to you. Money you overpaid, interest-free, for an entire year. From a purely rational standpoint, a refund is a bad deal. But emotionally, it feels amazing, and the system quietly relies on that illusion. This is why taxes generate so much anger, not just because of the amount, but because of how they are collected, framed, and experienced. And eventually all of this leads to one final question: are you a servant of the system or its customer? In a democracy, especially in the United States, the taxpayer is supposed to be the boss. Taxes are not a tribute to a king, they are payment for services. Roads, security, courts, infrastructure, stability, you are not asking for favors, you are paying a bill. And paying customers have rights: the right to transparency, the right to accountability, the right to demand value for money. Understanding taxes doesn't make them disappear, but it does something just as powerful. It turns frustration into clarity, and clarity is the first step toward control. Because the moment you understand where your money goes and why, you stop being confused, and confused people are easy to manipulate. If you found this breakdown useful, I would be genuinely grateful for your support. Write a comment, subscribe, and like the video. It really helps the channel. and it helps keep conversations like this alive.